The bus coughed and sputtered, a wheezing metal beast against the unnatural silence of downtown Chicago. Elias gripped the worn leather of the seat, his knuckles white. Just hours ago, the streets had been a river of frantic humanity, a cacophony of screams and the guttural moans that were becoming sickeningly familiar. Now, it was just empty. Or worse. He'd seen it. Through the grimy window, he'd watched a woman, her face a mask of pure terror, being dragged down an alley by what used to be her neighbor. The sounds, they were unspeakable. A wet, tearing sound, followed by a choked gasp that ended too soon. And then, the shuffling. That damn, relentless shuffling. It was etched into his brain, a soundtrack to the end of everything. His stomach twisted. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, just a stale granola bar he'd found in the bus's glove compartment. Thirst was a more immediate problem, a sandpaper rasp in his throat. He looked at the other passengers, huddled and silent, their eyes wide with a fear that mirrored his own. No one spoke. No one dared. The driver, a burly man named Frank who'd always had a gruff but friendly word, was now slumped over the steering wheel, his skin a ghastly gray. Elias nudged him gently. No response. A quick glance confirmed the worst. Frank's eyes were milky, and a dark stain bloomed on his shirt. Elias felt a surge of panic, hot and suffocating. Frank wasn't just dead, he was changing. The idea of being trapped in a metal box with a fresh one was unbearable. He had to get out. He unbuckled his seatbelt, the click sounding like a gunshot in the oppressive quiet. He moved carefully, his senses on high alert, scanning the faces around him. A young woman across the aisle, Sarah, met his gaze, her eyes pleading. She was clutching a tattered backpack like a lifeline. Elias knew that look, the same one he saw in the mirror. Pure, unadulterated terror, laced with a desperate flicker of defiance. He nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. They were the only two who seemed to have any sense of self-preservation left. The rest were either catatonic or already succumbing to the inevitable. He could feel the rising heat from Frank's body, the subtle twitch of his fingers. It was time. Elias eased open the emergency exit door, the cool, polluted air a welcome, if chilling, embrace. Sarah was right behind him. The street was a desolate wasteland. Cars were scattered like discarded toys, some overturned, others with doors flung open. The distant wail of sirens had long since died out, replaced by the unnerving chorus of the infected. Elias pointed down the street, towards what looked like a partially collapsed convenience store. "We need supplies," he whispered, his voice raw. "Water. Food. Anything." Sarah just nodded, her breath catching in her throat. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The air hung heavy with the stench of decay and something metallic, like old blood. Every shadow seemed to harbor a threat. Elias scanned the windows of the buildings, his heart pounding against his ribs. He knew they couldn't stay out in the open for long. He also knew that the people still alive might be even more dangerous than the shambling dead. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. He looked at Sarah, a stranger he was now bound to by the sheer horror of their circumstances. "What would you do? If you saw someone you knew, someone you cared about, turning right in front of you, what would be your first instinct? Would you try to help, or would you run?" Elias didn't have an answer, not for himself, and certainly not for anyone else. He just knew he had to keep moving. He had to find a way to survive this, not just for himself, but for the memory of the world that was gone. If you're watching this, if you're somehow hearing my voice, please, hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like. It's all I have left. This might be the last recording. He scrambled through the debris, the metallic screech of something unseen dragging across the pavement echoing behind him. He didn't dare look back. The air was thick with a smell he couldn't quite place, acrid, metallic, and something else, something like decay that had been left out in the sun too long. His lungs burned with every ragged breath. Every shadow seemed to writhe, to shift with an unnatural purpose. He'd learned that lesson quickly: nothing was ever just a shadow. His goal was the old grocery store on Elm Street. It had been one of the first places he'd seen them, back when everything was still just confusion. But it was also a place with a basement, a place that might offer some semblance of security, or at least a temporary reprieve. The main entrance was a wreck, glass shards glinting like broken teeth. He found a service door, partially pried open, and squeezed through. Inside, it was dark, the air even heavier. Shelves lay toppled, their contents scattered and rotting. A low moan, inhuman and guttural, seemed to come from deeper within the aisles. He froze, straining his ears. He could hear it now, a shuffling sound, punctuated by wet, heavy thuds. It was close. Too close. He ducked behind a fallen display of canned goods, the metal cold against his cheek. He could see movement at the end of the aisle, a hunched silhouette against the faint light filtering in from the street. It wasn't walking. It was lurching, its limbs moving with a jerky, unnatural gait. He held his breath, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He could feel the vibrations of its movement through the floor. He had to get to the back, to the basement door. He knew it was there. He'd scouted this place weeks ago, before the real chaos set in. He crept from his hiding place, moving as silently as he could, his boots crunching on what sounded like dried leaves, but he knew it was something worse. He reached the back of the store, the darkness here almost absolute. He fumbled along the wall, his fingers brushing against cold metal. The door. It was still there. As he tried the handle, a piercing shriek ripped through the silence, much closer this time. It was accompanied by the sound of splintering wood. They were inside. He yanked on the door, but it was locked, jammed. Panic flared, hot and suffocating. He could hear them now, multiple of them, the shuffling and moaning growing louder, closer. He turned, his eyes wide, trying to pierce the oppressive darkness. A pair of eyes, reflecting no light, met his. And then, the smell, that sickening, decaying odor, was right in front of him. He scrambled back, stumbling, his hands searching wildly for anything to use as a weapon. The shriek intensified, a wave of raw, primal sound that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. He managed to shove himself away just as a grasping hand, cold and skeletal, swiped where his face had been. He hit the rough ground hard, the breath knocked out of him. The shuffling continued, a dozen sets of them now, he guessed, circling. He could feel their presence, a palpable weight in the air, a suffocating hunger. He pushed himself up onto his elbows, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The darkness was absolute, but he could make out vague, hunched shapes moving just beyond his vision. Another shriek, closer this time, and he knew he couldn't just lie there. His fingers brushed against something hard and jagged. A piece of what felt like broken pottery. It wasn't much, but it was something. He gripped it tight, the sharp edge digging into his palm. He could hear them breathing now, ragged, wheezing breaths that promised no mercy. One of the shapes detached itself from the others, moving with a jerky, uneven gait directly towards him. He could see the glint of something, maybe teeth, in the faint, almost imperceptible movement of its head. He stayed low, trying to use the terrain, what little he could feel of it, to his advantage. The pottery shard felt fragile in his hand. He needed a better weapon, a chance. He rolled to the side as the creature lunged, its form a blur in the gloom. He heard the sound of it colliding with the ground, a wet thud. He didn't wait to see if it was hurt. He scrambled to his feet, the shard still clutched tight, and ran. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away from the sounds, from the smell. The ground was uneven, littered with debris that snagged at his feet. He stumbled again, nearly falling, but caught himself. He risked a glance back. The shapes were still there, still shuffling, still pursuing. But they weren't gaining on him. He was faster, fueled by pure terror. He could hear the sounds of the chase echoing, a symphony of despair. He needed to find a way out, a place to hide, a way to fight back. He saw a slight incline ahead, a potential barrier. He pushed himself harder, his lungs burning, his muscles screaming. He reached the incline and scrambled up it, hoping it would give him some advantage. At the top, he found himself on a slightly more open area, but the darkness still pressed in. He could still hear them, but the sounds were slightly further away now, as if they were struggling with the terrain. He didn't stop. He kept moving, his only goal to put as much distance as possible between himself and the things that hunted him. He didn't know if he could outrun them forever, but he had to try. Survival was the only thought in his mind. Okay, so picture this, Marco's trying to get to his apartment, a few blocks away. He's on Elm Street, right in the heart of downtown. It's chaos. Cars are smashed, fires are everywhere, and the smell, God, the smell. It's like rotten meat mixed with something metallic, burning your nostrils. He'd heard the initial reports on the radio, some weird flu, people acting strange. Then, bam. It all went south, fast. He sees it then. A woman, dressed in a business suit, hair all matted, just, gnawing on a man's leg. Not a quick bite, but tearing, ripping. The sounds are horrific, wet and guttural. Marco freezes, his breath catching in his throat. He'd always been a bit squeamish, but this is a nightmare made real. The woman's head snaps up, her eyes, they're not eyes anymore. Just milky, bloodshot orbs, fixed on him. She lets out this unearthly, wet groan and starts shuffling towards him, still dragging the mangled limb. That's when it hits him. This isn't a movie. This is happening. He turns and runs. He doesn't think, he just reacts. His heart's pounding so hard he can feel it in his ears. He ducks into an alleyway, the sounds of the city's demise echoing around him. He can hear screams, not of panic anymore, but of agony. He peeks out and sees more of them, shambling, lurching, completely devoid of any humanity. They're not just sick, they're gone. Replaced by this insatiable hunger. He decides the apartment is too risky. Too many people, too many potential traps. He needs somewhere safer, somewhere he can think. His mind races. Where do you even go when the whole world is going to hell? He remembers a small convenience store a few blocks over. The owner, Mr. Henderson, always kept a decent stock. Maybe there's something there, a chance. But the thought of going back out there, of facing more of them, makes his stomach clench. Every shadow seems to writhe. Every distant moan sends a jolt of pure terror through him. He's alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. The city, once his home, now feels like a predator's den. He's got nothing but the clothes on his back and the rapidly fading hope that he can somehow navigate this new, horrifying reality. He takes a deep, shaky breath, the metallic tang of blood still thick in the air, and steps out of the alley, his eyes scanning every movement. He moved through the deserted streets like a ghost, trying his best to remain unseen. The silence was the worst. It wasn't the absence of noise, but a heavy, waiting silence, punctuated by the occasional guttural groan that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. He hugged the buildings, his senses on high alert. A flicker of movement in his peripheral vision sent a cold dread down his spine, but it was just a loose piece of debris skittering across the pavement, caught by a phantom breeze. He didn't dare look up at the darkened windows, who knew what might be staring back. His stomach rumbled, a pathetic reminder of his basic needs. Food. Water. He'd seen supplies in a corner store a few blocks back, but the thought of going inside, of potentially encountering what made the groans, paralyzed him. He kept moving, the alley he'd sheltered in now a distant memory, replaced by the gnawing fear of what lay around the next corner. He stumbled over a discarded object, catching himself before he fell. It was a child's shoe, small and scuffed. The sight of it twisted something inside him, a sharp pang of grief for the life that was, the normalcy that was gone. He pressed on, the urgency of survival overriding the paralysis of fear. He needed to find shelter, a place where he could barricade himself, even for a few hours. He spotted a narrow gap between two buildings, barely wide enough for a person. It led to a small, overgrown courtyard. Maybe it was a dead end, or maybe it offered a brief respite. He squeezed through, the rough brick scraping his already torn clothes. The courtyard was filled with shadows, but also with the faint, sweet smell of dying flowers. It was eerily quiet here, a different kind of quiet than the streets. This felt more like a forgotten place, a place that time had left behind. He could see a rusted fire escape leading up to a darkened window on the second floor of one of the buildings. It was risky, but staying out in the open felt even riskier. He hesitated, listening. Nothing. Just the thumping of his own heart. He began to climb, the metal groaning under his weight. Each creak felt like a siren's call. He reached the window, his hands raw from the rust and sharp edges. He peered through the grimy glass. Darkness. And a faint, unsettling smell. He tried the window. Locked. He pushed harder, desperation fueling his strength. The old wood splintered, and the window gave way with a soft groan. He pulled himself inside, landing with a soft thud on a dusty floor. The room was barely visible in the dim light filtering from the street. It looked like an abandoned apartment, filled with the decaying remnants of a life suddenly interrupted. An overturned chair. A single, unlit lamp. And a faint, sticky patch on the floorboards that he tried very hard not to examine too closely. He closed the window as best he could, the broken glass scraping against the frame. He was inside. But the silence of the apartment wasn't comforting. It was the same heavy, waiting silence, pregnant with an unseen threat. He could hear it now, a faint, rhythmic scraping from somewhere within the building, or perhaps from the floor above. It was slow, deliberate, and utterly chilling. He backed away from the window, trying to melt into the shadows, his breath catching in his throat. He edged further into the apartment, his eyes darting around the dimly lit space. Dust motes danced in the slivers of moonlight that pierced the grimy windows. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else, something metallic and coppery. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating quiet. The scraping sound continued, a persistent, unnerving rhythm that seemed to echo the frantic pulse in his own ears. He strained to identify its source, moving from one darkened room to another, each step agonizingly slow and deliberate. The furniture was draped in faded sheets, ghost-like figures in the gloom. He reached the living room. The scraping was louder here, emanating from behind a large, heavy wardrobe pushed against the far wall. A primal instinct screamed at him to flee, to find another way out, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. Curiosity, a dangerous companion, warred with his mounting terror. He could feel the vibrations through the floorboards, a subtle tremor that hinted at something substantial moving on the other side of the wardrobe. It wasn't just scraping anymore, it was a shuffling, a dragging. He moved towards the wardrobe, his hand reaching out, trembling, to touch the rough wood. The scraping stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was even worse, a vacuum that seemed to suck the air from his lungs. He held his breath, listening. A soft thud echoed from behind the wardrobe, followed by a low, guttural groan. It was a sound of immense effort, of something large and heavy being shifted. Then, a faint, oily creak, as if the wardrobe itself were groaning under an unseen weight. Suddenly, the scraping resumed, but this time it was different. It was faster, more urgent, and it was moving. It sounded like it was coming from the other side of the wall, then from above, then from below. It was disorienting, as if whatever was making the noise was everywhere at once. Panic began to set in. He backed away from the wardrobe, his gaze fixed on the wall, expecting it to burst open at any moment. He could feel a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty apartment, it was a cold that seeped into his bones. He stumbled backward, bumping into a table, sending a small, porcelain figurine crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking porcelain was deafening in the silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a slow, deliberate scraping began again, right outside the door of the room he was in. It was closer now, much closer. He could almost feel the presence on the other side. He scrambled backward, his eyes wide with terror, searching for an escape that wasn't there. The doorknob began to turn, slowly, agonizingly. He pressed himself against the far wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps, ready for whatever horror was about to be revealed. The door creaked open, revealing only darkness. Thank you for joining us on this journey. As you've seen, survival often hinges on quick thinking and resourcefulness, even when faced with the most dire circumstances. Remember the account of Amelia, trapped in a decaying library. Her initial panic was understandable, but by focusing on the discarded maps and the faint outline of a ventilation shaft, she managed to create an escape route, demonstrating how knowledge, even from seemingly useless sources, can become a lifeline. Her ability to analyze her surroundings and not succumb to despair was paramount. Then there was David, whose harrowing experience in the flooded tunnels highlighted the critical importance of preparation. His waterproof container, filled with essential tools and a small amount of preserved food, allowed him to endure the extended period underground. He didn't just react, he had a contingency. This underscores a key tenet of survivalism: proactive preparedness. Always have a go bag ready, even for minor inconveniences, as you never know when a situation might escalate unexpectedly. The chilling encounter just outside the door, the slow, agonizing turn of the knob, and the subsequent reveal of only darkness, this moment embodies the paralyzing fear that can grip us. It's in these instances, when faced with the unknown and the potential for unimaginable danger, that inner fortitude becomes our greatest ally. Amelia, as we saw, fought through her fear by seeking solutions. David, though tested, relied on his foresight. Both understood, implicitly or explicitly, that succumbing to panic is a self-defeating strategy. Maintaining a degree of composure, no matter how difficult, allows your mind to process information and formulate plans rather than freeze. The darkness that greeted our protagonist was not an end, but a new beginning, a shift in the narrative of their struggle. It demanded adaptation, a further exploration of the immediate environment, and a reliance on senses other than sight. These stories, though fictional, are imbued with lessons that resonate in our own lives. The world, while not always presenting such overt threats, constantly challenges us. Learning to manage fear, to prepare for the unexpected, and to find solutions in adversity are skills that enrich our existence and can, quite literally, save our lives. We hope these narratives have offered you both insight and a moment of reflection. If you found value in this content, please consider subscribing to our channel for more discussions on resilience, preparedness, and the human spirit's capacity to overcome. We also encourage you to share your thoughts and any survival tips you might have in the comments below. Your engagement helps us grow and allows us to continue exploring these vital themes.